Okay, final example is from a shoot for the Funnel Sisters. Chess and Nikki, Chess on the left, Nikki on the right, are a digital marketing agency. They specialize in funnel design and conversion copy, and they traveled to the DC area from Arizona and Oklahoma for their shoot. We had a gorgeous location lined up from Peerspace, and again, doesn't this seem to be the theme? It was way darker in person than it looked on the listing photos, and we had nothing but rain, rain, rain in the forecast. Add to that, there were a ton of trees on the property. I don't know if it was winter with like no leaves on the trees when they shot the listing photos, but there was a lot of tree cover on the day of our shoot, and we had very, very little light coming in on set. So in this first living room scene right here, we had a window to my right and a skylight overhead. The desk is nicely lit because it's flat and it's facing up towards the ceiling, but anything standing or sitting upright is in shadow unless I were to have Chess lean back and angle her face up toward the window. So unless I had her do that, the light was not going to fall on her face. It's falling on the top of her head, but not on her face. So this was a case for the pro photo. I brought in my 2-foot Octabox. I put it as far into the corner as possible behind me to my right, and I feathered the light so that it crossed in front of Chess. See how much brighter her face is here now that we've brought light back into the scene? Even though this was a simple lighting setup, it still took several minutes to set up. Timestamp on this one was 1:59 for this first photo and 2:11 for the one where I felt comfortable with the lighting scenario. Final example, also from Chess and Nikki's shoot, was shot just a few feet away in the kitchen. So we had a window to my left, their right, that faced into the backyard, which was shaded by trees. So here's the unedited shot with just the ambient light. You can see there's a bit hitting the right sides of their faces, but it's not even. And the light in the room behind them is brighter than the light that's hitting Chess and Nikki's faces, making them look all the more in shadow. And this shot's settings were ISO 4000, f2.8, and my shutter speed was at 1/100th of a second. So I wasn't willing to budge on any of this. I couldn't take my ISO up any higher. I didn't want to lower my aperture, and I couldn't lower my shutter speed any further or I'd risk motion blur. So OCF was the answer here. So my pro photo and my 2-foot Octabox were on a light stand to my right. I went ahead and turned those on. And by the way, having your assistant act as a voice-activated light stand is so much faster than moving lights yourself. So if you are not already shooting with an assistant, they are a must-have for any shoot involving off-camera flash. All right, so for this first test shot, the light is over to my right. I lowered my ISO to 2000 to avoid blowing out the light coming from the flash. And I also increased my shutter speed to 1/60th of a second to cut down on some of the ambient light in the background. Because like I said, in this shot right here, the ambient light was brighter than the light that was falling on, the ambient light in the back of the room was brighter than the light was falling on my subjects. So for this first test shot, the OCF was a little too powerful for my taste. See how much brighter the flash is than the ambient light? The fact that the light from my pro photo is brighter than the ambient light is what's making it feel flashy to me. Look specifically at the right side, her right side, not yours, the right side of Nikki's face. She's the one in the floral top. So the right side of her face is significantly darker than the left side where the light from the pro photo is hitting. And I didn't want my off-camera flash to be brighter than the brightest ambient light. I wanted to balance it with the ambient light so that I could even out the light across Chess and Nikki's faces. So the background became a little darker than I wanted as a result of lowering my ISO and upping my shutter speed. And again, I wanted the light to be relatively even throughout the frame so that everything would feel more naturally lit. And the purpose of all of this is because I don't want to draw attention to the light source. I want the main subject here to be my clients, not the light that it took to achieve the photograph. So I upped my ISO to 3200 and I slowed my shutter speed from 1/160th to 1/100th, which is a little lower than I like to go for anything that's moving. Typically, I try to keep my shutter speed at 1/25th of a second, but when I'm shooting with strobe, I'm willing to go a little bit lower to 1/100th of a second if I can keep my subjects relatively still. So I did all of that for the sake of letting more light into the background, upping the ISO and lowering the shutter speed, all for the sake of letting more light into the background of the scene. And then I pulled the power on the flash head all the way down to 20%, or the lowest it'll go, so that the light on Chess and Nikki wouldn't feel quite so extreme. Here is the final edited photo a few frames later. I'm pretty happy with this. If I were doing it all over again today, I would actually use a larger modifier like the 2x3 softbox or a 3-foot Octabox if I had one, just to give me a larger light source. I was shooting with a 2-foot softbox here. The shadow from Nikki's hair on her left cheek, it's just a little harder than I'd like, and I feel like that gives away the fact that we were shooting with OCF. but I didn't yet own the 2x3 foot softbox when I shot the session, and the space was definitely too small for the 5-foot parabolic umbrella. So all in all, I can confidently say I did the best that I could with what I had on hand. This is the challenge of shooting on location in rental spaces like the ones that you guys find on Peerspace and Airbnb and Home Studio List. They are not photography studios. They are people's actual homes, which means that they were not built with room to accommodate big lighting rigs. So being able to adjust your approach on the fly to not only find lighting that adequately lights your subject for the look that you're trying to achieve, but that also does so within the confines of the space itself, this can be the difference between feeling sick to your stomach when you go to cull through your files or getting in your car after a shoot knowing that you absolutely crushed it. You guys have got this. If you get on set and you realize you need off-camera flash, just remember, step 1, set your ambient light. Step 2, set your key light, your primary off-camera flash. Step 3, set your fill light if you're going to use a second off-camera flash. Take your time. Don't rush. Rushing through an off-camera flash setup because you're nervous is a surefire way to make a call that you end up regretting later when you're culling and editing. Remember, your client will not begrudge you the time that it takes to get this right. I promise you. They trust you, and they're going to be grateful that you went the distance to make their photos amazing. If you find yourself on set and you start to panic about the light, excuse yourself for a moment. Maybe say you have to go to the bathroom or grab something from your car. I actually did this during Chess and Nikki's session because I was stressing out a little bit. So excuse yourself, take a moment, take a deep breath or two. Remember what you've learned, and then walk through steps 1, 2, and 3. You've got this. You know what you're doing, and even if you don't always feel like one, you are an expert.